Hey everyone, Pugs here with two new reviews for y'all. Today I'm covering Selling Out and Funny Pants, two episodes that aren't really talked about a ton, but are still quite characteristically Season 4 episodes. I guess Selling Out has a little more conversation around it, but I never see anyone talk about Funny Pants. Guess I'll be fixing that, at least for the day you're watching. As always, thank you to everyone watching today, y'all are great, and with that all said and done, let's just get right into it. Something that I find very funny about Selling Out is that this episode is from season 4, and that's because it foreshadows a lot of what middle-aged SpongeBob haters will start to complain about very soon. See, middle-aged SpongeBob haters love to say that the show became very corporate at this time. I'll be honest, that's an allegation that annoys me very much, because first off, the show has always been corporate, if corporate means greenlit for the purpose of making money. Newsflash, that's how TV networks work. Secondly, I feel like calling something corporate discounts all the hard work and passion put into it by the crew that works on the show. And don't act like the crew isn't passionate about the show, because they are. Now that social media is a thing, we can see the passion before our very eyes, so miss me with that bullshit, thank you very much. But to back up for a second, yes, it's true that Nick execs make big decisions about this show. And yes, it's true that Nickelodeon has used this show in pretty, let's just say, artistically devoid ways. This year's Super Bowl, I'm looking at you. But that doesn't mean that the show is a soulless husk of its former self. That's what I vehemently disagree with, and that's why I find it funny that this episode is coming in so early in season 4. And yeah, let me actually talk about Selling Out now. I like that this episode starts with a song, kind of makes the episode stand out a little, and it's a pretty cute little song too. I've got no problems with it. There's some really fun visuals in here too, and I love the little scrapbook with Mr. Krabs and Pearl, so cute. Squidward's commentary at the end of it is pretty funny as well, and this episode gets right into things with Mr. Krabs being given a crap ton of money to sell the Krusty Krab. What this episode is really about is pretty astute, and I like that. I also like episodes getting into the business practices of the Krusty Krab, which is something I feel like episodes beyond the first few seasons started doing really well. Selling Out is a fast-paced, story-driven episode, and I appreciate that, especially when the story is something like this, one with a real message and some real heart. But it doesn't have to be like that for me to like it. Anyway, one thing I also really like is the character design for Carl, because he just looks a little off. You can just tell there's something off about him. It's in his eyes and voice. And then the fact that the restaurant is then renamed to Krabby Mondays is simply perfect, because to me it nails the feeling of a restaurant that's been sold to a larger conglomerate, especially once we see the inside of it and it looks like every generic American family restaurant ever. So, Mr. Krabs sells the restaurant and retires, and his retirement adventures are pretty enjoyable. I really liked the "wait a minute, I hate golf" joke. I thought it was hilarious, and it's a joke I think about with some frequency, gotta be honest. When I wrote this review originally, someone had made a tweet referencing this joke, except it was like, "wait a minute, I hate Twitter." And you know what? I still feel that. Probably even more now. Anyway, I just love how clearly retirement is not something that Mr. Krabs needs at this point in his life. I also like how there was no shill soapboxing about the value of work and blah 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 because people deserve to retire when they want to, and in fact nobody should have to work in order to live, and that's just how I feel about it. You want to see a soapbox? Well there's a soapbox for you. Anyway, just to end this section, I also liked Pearl for the little bit she was here. The way she's just completely over Mr. Krabs is hilarious, and her reaction is definitely worthy of a reaction meme of its own, which it definitely has one. Another thing I like about this episode is that it has a nice undercurrent of tension, which we can see most clearly in the segments with Squidward. Squidward's hatred of the birthday song was very relatable, as I hate being on the receiving end of those myself. I also love the chat with Carl and how Squidward's literally threatened with violence in order to coerce him into being cheery. For whatever reason, it reminds me of those videos RDC World has of Chick-fil-A, linked in the description of course. Do y'all watch those guys? I think they're fucking hilarious. But anyway, yeah. I love how threatening the vibe of this whole restaurant is, especially with Carl always watching and Squidward literally trying to warn Mr. Krabs. And the more we learn about this restaurant, the worse it gets, because not only are they mysterious and probably violent and not above disappearing their employees, but they're also pulling a McDonald's, fuck that place by the way, and cooking with synthetic meat. This episode really just makes the entire enterprise look nasty as hell, which it is. The Krabby Patties are no longer being cooked with love as we've seen them to be, or as we've known them to be, and it's sad. I love how perfectly dramatic SpongeBob is in this scene as well, telling Mr. Krabs what horrible things these new owners have done. And once Mr. Krabs sees the automatic cash registers, that's the final straw for him, and he goes apeshit, ruining the restaurant in a great scene of chaos. I also loved how free thinker is a code red for this entire operation, very on the nose in the best way. Seriously, this episode has got commentary the same way episodes like Squid on Strike had commentary. The way this episode ends is also great, with that great kind of clever and wordy humor that I like to see. Well, maybe not exactly that, since it's more like being blatantly honest in a fun way, but whatever. Mr. Krabs basically says that the Krusty crew is screwed, but at least they have each other. And of course, when Squidward actually starts to buy into that wholesomeness, we get the ending stinger of Mr. Krabs shutting that shit down quick. Which now makes me wonder just how many episodes end on Mr. Krabs saying something to the effect of, "Get back to work," to SpongeBob and or Squidward. An interesting question. I quite like Selling Out. This is a hilarious and clever episode with an air of maturity to it, and it's one of those episodes that gets funnier the older you get and the more experience you have with the things they are talking about, especially now with the proliferation of AI art. Disgusting. This episode is back to being relevant, because obviously this whole thing was a reference to McDonald's chicken, but it covers basically any situation where corporate cuts corners and reduces quality to the ignorance of mindless consumers. This episode also has great pacing and atmosphere and stays consistently funny throughout, a clear addition to my amazing tier, where it comes in with a score of 9.3 out of 10. Coming up next is Funny Pants, a rather forgettable episode that, from what I've seen, veers on the side of disliked. Also, fun fact, but this episode features the first use of Happy Sponge Chase Vibes, which is low-key a song used in the title cards of some of the most forgettable episodes in the show. I actually thought this song was used a whole lot more than it has been, though it did come back in the Krusty bucket after an absence of over 100 episodes, so that's cool. Also, you know what else is cool? This episode, Funny Pants, marks the moment I started rewatching episodes for my episode reviews. Yep, for the episodes before this, I was doing them from memory and the aid of the SpongeBob wiki, unless said otherwise, but all of these things are besides the point. Why don't I actually begin reviewing this episode properly? Okay, so here's the thing about this episode, just right out the gate. I simply do not understand why the writers thought it would be a good idea to make an entire episode about SpongeBob's laugh. On one hand, yeah, it's a harmless topic, but on the other, it's his laugh. What is there to say about that? SpongeBob's laugh is supposed to be a decently annoying sound, but not truly annoying. The reason why it's not truly annoying is because it comes in small bursts, and also it's a cute laugh to me, but mostly that first point. So in other words, SpongeBob's laugh is not annoying because it doesn't span entire episodes. Same goes for literally any sound. Lots of sounds become annoying after 11 minutes of them. So what am I saying? I'm saying SpongeBob's laugh annoyed me in this episode, full stop. I'm convinced that Tom Kenny was asked to laugh as annoyingly as possible because SpongeBob's laugh is never grating in this way. Ever. The characters in this episode are written well enough, though. Like, SpongeBob finding the most mundane things funny is perfectly in character for him, so I like that the episode was building on this established character trait of his. It's just the fact that his laugh is ear-grating in this one that isn't good at all. I also think that Squidward's being driven to insanity by SpongeBob's laugh is entertaining at the very least. And of course, this episode is the source of the meme of Squidward lying in bed troubled, so that's fun. Another problem I have with Funny Pants is that it isn't very funny, which I suppose is kind of ironic. And in the absence of anything to really dislike about this episode, this makes the episode rather boring. Like, the "another day, another nickel" joke is not very funny, just like Squidward says, and SpongeBob repeating it a whole bunch doesn't make it any funnier. When SpongeBob's trying not to laugh, I did like the part with Patrick slipping on a banana peel. It was pretty funny, but it was one of the very few jokes that really worked for me in this episode. I also liked the randomness of SpongeBob running away and digging himself in a hole, or when he imagines himself in an iron laugh box. Those are just about the only jokes, though. And with the humor of this episode not being where it needs to be, it would typically be up to the plot to pick up the slack when it comes to making the episode an entertaining venture. Unfortunately, overall, the plot here is kinda meh. Squidward makes up an illness so that SpongeBob will stop laughing. SpongeBob's ensuing attempts to try not to laugh are fine, and he is of course presented with a million obstacles to doing so. SpongeBob manages not to laugh for the rest of the day, but when he gets up the next day, his laugh is gone, and the plot continues to be meh. Frankly, the plot with SpongeBob trying not to laugh was far more interesting than him thinking that he's lost his laugh. Seeing SpongeBob sad is not something anybody really wants to see, much less for an entire 5 to 6 minutes. Though I did like the part where SpongeBob gets stuck on Patrick's head. That was really funny. Squidward is an absolute jerk about SpongeBob's plight here, which does make the ending sweeter. And actually, while I'm here, let me talk about this real quick. This episode feels a lot like a redux of I Had an Accident, except more malicious because it's Squidward tricking SpongeBob into thinking he can't laugh just so he can get some peace and quiet. And yes, I'm calling it malicious because SpongeBob doesn't really do anything wrong in this episode. Squidward should just invest in some earplugs. This is why the ending of the episode is pretty satisfying. The self-awareness shown by Squidward when he confesses to SpongeBob is a nice touch, and things get really good when we see the role reversal between SpongeBob and Squidward, and it's hilarious and full of universal justice. I love the moment where SpongeBob just suddenly stops and is like, it's not really that funny, and then just closes the door in Squidward's face. It's amazing. And then Squidward losing his laugh box just to get SpongeBob's is great. So yeah, I like this ending. All in all, Funny Pants is alright. I really only truly like the ending and a few jokes here and there. The rest of the episode veers between being decent to being meh and boring or potentially even annoying. But this episode doesn't anger me like an episode of My Barely Tolerable would. Its crime, if we can call it that, is being unfunny more than once, which is why I think that it belongs in my mediocre tier, where it comes in with a score of 5.5 out of 10. As always, I'll be ending this review with some closing thoughts of mine. My first thought has nothing to do with anything, but I've got to stop writing scripts during class. I guess this will become a non-issue very soon, but I just have to say that. My second thought was something that I had wrote up while writing my script for Selling Out, but I decided to cut it because I was rambling too much, and so now I'm just going to say it here because I like saying my ideas no matter how rambly they are. But basically, I was going to go on this whole soapbox tangent about my thoughts on plots involving mindless consumers being tricked by evil corporations. So like what Selling Out is. And honestly, this goes for a lot of different plots of this type. So like one thing that has always bothered me about plots like that is that they imply that it is only our main character or characters who ever spotted the problem with the situation, and that's just, it implies a certain level of exceptionalism needed to make change, which is very individualist and discounts the power of collective effort to create change. It also assumes the stupidity of the larger populace, and it feeds this need to have a face for a movement, which is damaging because no movement should have a singular face attached to it because humans are humans and they aren't perfect. And this is making me think of the genocide of Palestinians and how we just had this discussion a month or so ago. It's also making me think of the Democratic Republic of the Congo or Sudan and how it's a mixture of anti-blackness, with that being the most of it, and this lack of a singular face that makes people not care about it as much. That along with other things like people wanting their new iPhone. But anyway, back to my main point. You see what I said about rambling? What I'm trying to say is that plots like the one in Selling Out, while they do make these critiques about society and capitalism and certain other isms, they still serve to uphold the thing that is creating these isms in the first place by encouraging this idea that we need to unify under a singular face to create change, not work as a collective. I can already see people saying that it isn't that serious, but isn't it? Don't you think we should be finding these patterns in media? There's so much more I could say, but it requires so much more context and time, and I think I've probably bored you all to death by now, if you can even tell what I'm saying, because I'm really just going stream of consciousness here, so I'm jumping around ridiculously. And with that, I think I'll just end this review now, and I'll see y'all in the next one.